Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the 174th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Darrin C. And today's self-sabotage, today's topic is self-sabotage and chaos. And this was kind of born out of our last podcast and some of our conversations in it. So can you share what that means to you, Darrin, and why you were happy to come here and discuss that today before we get into the questions?
Yeah, so just want to say thank you for having me on your show, Milan. It's always a pleasure
Love you, brother.
to be here with you. Yeah, man, early on, I think, man, I'm my worst enemy. I know I was when I got here. Just always, for whatever reason, and I think we'll talk more about all those reasons in the show, but I don't want myself to succeed for some reason. So when you brought up the topic last time of, self-sabotaging chaos, I thought it was overwhelmingly fittingly for the newcomer, but even for guys that have, like me, that have been around a long time, have to be careful not to fall back into that pattern of self-sabotaging chaos.
Yeah, for myself, massively inside addiction, like how many times I blew points in relationships by choosing substance, by, jobs, by choosing substance, my health, my very life, my whole addiction culminated in my heart stopping one night. And that was because of my own, that was me. There's nobody else to blame for my choices but myself. And, but it hasn't stopped there. And it's getting better. It's getting better, but it's like that self-sabotage undermines my own progress, right? I can see old behaviors returning when it's around, and I can see how it threatens the integrity of relationships in itself, right? And then chaos is just that confusion and disorder that follows when we walk the path of self-sabotage. In the AA book, it talks about pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, and that's where those two things lead me, and in NA, I'm bisexual, and it says in the Living Clean book, it says we create a wreckage even after we've put the drugs down. And it's certainly been my experience. And so now I'm at a point where I've got a new sponsor actually very recently, but I'm also working in a step working group and kind of coming at a step 4 from a couple different ways. And one of the ways is beliefs. And we'll get more into that when we get to the questions. But for me, what I'm seeing is that there is some real fundamental beliefs about my lack of worthiness, that are hiding behind these bad choices. And it's such a crazy thing because nobody has caused more damage to my life than me,
And I think, we talked about this a little bit on the last show, is when the literature says we had to let go of old ideals, we think that just talking about the way we view recovery and drugs and alcohol, but you're exactly right. I have to let go of all those old ideas about myself, how I feel about myself and all that stuff. So yeah, that was a good point.
The problem when you're a child and an adult or other bullies or whatever say something to you, you believe them. It's also one of the great things that allows us to learn at a very rapid rate. But when the information's not true, we don't question it and we assume it to be true. It can be damaging for decades of our lives, maybe even for the entire life if we don't get tools like this program to address it. So I'm going to roll into a question here. So
Okay.
self-sabotage is the quiet voice that says, I don't deserve peace, and chaos is its echo. How did you first recognize that voice in your own recovery?
Good question. Yeah, we just talked about this the other night with a group of friends of ours. We were talking about recovery.
Mm,
The first thing that I have to understand about recovery, Milan, especially if I'm new, is that drugs and alcohol were never my problem. That was a shocker to me when I got here because I thought that's why I was here.
mm,
But that's not my problem, right? It's my thinking, my feelings, all the spiritual malady that the book talks about, right? And so I have to understand early on that this voice that's in the beginning, it's telling me, hey, go out and drink or go out and use. It's that's my alcoholism, that's the disease. And but what they've taught me from good sponsorship over the years and being a student of the literature is that voice never really goes away. It just changes its direction. Like, so I'll have 16 years in a couple of weeks, and I can't tell you the last time that I thought about drugs or alcohol. It's been
mm,
removed from me, but I
mm,
still have that voice that tells me you're not good enough, or you're better
mm,
than, or
mm,
go tell your boss off, or whatever, that wants to cause that chaos and not have peace in my life. And
yeah,
so I learned early on to recognize that voice as far as it pertained to drugs and alcohol, and I continue today to listen, to try to recognize that voice versus the voice of God. And I'll end with this, Milan. I'll just keep it super simple because they said keep it simple, right?
mm,
Is that if the voice is not lifting me up, propelling me forward, telling me good things in my life, then it's my disease. If it's telling me I'm not good enough or I'm better than or you don't deserve this or all that. And so that's, I think, the main thing is learning to distinguish between the two voices, because we have the two
mm,
voices inside, right? We have the
yeah,
God voice and then we have the disease voice or the ego or whatever you want to call it. It's
yeah,
just like the guy, you remember the guy in the story who was in the bar and he put the little whiskey in the milk? He
yeah.
thought it wouldn't hurt him on a full stomach. But I think what we miss in that, there's a line in there. He says, I vaguely sensed I was being none too smart. That's that voice inside of me, the
Mm,
good voice, the God voice, saying, hey, maybe this is not a good idea. And so that is recovery to me, is distinguishing those voices. So when I get that thought, you don't deserve this, you're not good enough, or go start this chaos, then I try to listen for that God thought that says, hold on, pause
mm.
for do something different. So
It's we need to get a better microphone for the God voice.
yeah.
It's like he's got the crappy Radio Shack microphone, and in addiction, the other guy's like on stage, like Nelly Furtado. Yeah. So how did I first recognize that voice inside my own recovery? Well, you know, I remember the first day I got out of treatment and I came home and I was on this pink cloud. Like, I mean, like pinker than your shirt. It was like hot pants pink. I was like floating. I'm like, man, I felt like I had evolved into somebody different in those 35 days. By all rights, I was a completely different person. But was I impervious to relationship cycles and patterns, and being the little shithead that I could have been in responses? And within 3 hours, I was in an argument with my wife. It was like bang, and I felt like I lost all of my recovery right there. Like I just felt like ooh, and like so deflated, and the old me looked for moments to go fuck it at that point. Like that, like one of my greatest triggers was misdirecting anger at her and escaping, right? And quite frankly, like I was not going back, and I had to stop. And I'm just like, okay, like this is just one example. Like, first of all, okay, I didn't yell, right? Like I started analyzing what had actually happened. We got into a disagreement. We disagreed. We both said some stuff that I like, I didn't like what she said to me. I'm sure she didn't like what I said to her, but you could ask her on that, but I'm sure she'd say the same. Uh, but the thing was, is that, it didn't, there was, there was like a softening to that interaction. And what recovery allowed me to do at that point was actually see that it was like my addiction trying to get me to say fuck it. And I actually still reacted better than I would have in the past. Even if it wasn't the reaction I would like to be living, in a God centered existence, it was still a move towards the right direction. And that's one of the things that, we're not going to immediately do a 180. We're just not going to immediately 180 on everything in our life. It takes time to turn a ship at sea, and it takes time to turn our souls into a better direction. Like you can have some really awakening moments, but there's always going to be something there that you fall back into, and takes time to nurture for myself. So, it was right that very first day out of treatment that I recognized that's still lurking there, regardless of if like my surrendering my addiction and my alcoholism, I was not craving. Like I never had a craving thought, and I've been really damn lucky. Or not lucky. I'm really grateful. Luck has nothing to do with it, I think, honestly. But the thing was, is that I recognized at that point it was like it's going to take some time to really have these things changed in the very essence of me, especially with family relationships. You know?
I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you said that, Milan, especially for the newcomer out there, because we're all or nothing people, right? I'm either 100 or
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah.
And so it's easy for the new person to get frustrated. They're going along so good, everything is going great. And then all of a sudden they screw up. They forget, number one, that they're human, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I love the literature so much, because these first 100 already had figured all this stuff out. They were us. They went through the things that we went through.
Mhm.
And there's a line in the book that says, right, a lifetime geared towards all this selfish self-centeredness is going to take some of us a long time to change, like you had said. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a good reminder. Is like, hey, this is not going to be changed overnight. And another
Mhm.
part of the book, he talks about the measuring stick, right? Because I want to be perfect yesterday. But he says, no, am I better than I was a week ago? That's the
Mhm.
measuring stick. And if I can keep into that I'm just constantly getting a little better, that spiritual progress the book talks
Mhm.
about, then I won't get so discouraged when I screw up and do something wrong. Yeah.
Like and that's where, doing the regular step 10 and everything helps us calibrate.
Yeah, for sure.
Like definitely we need to know what's going right in a day as well as what's going wrong.
Yeah.
If we just focus on what's wrong, we haven't gotten any gratitude in our day or our life, or uh, and me dwelling on the shitty parts of me is not a good place for me to be.
No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
So,
I got
do
a
you have a
question for you.
question? Yeah, I'm ready.
I do. What does self sabotage look like to you?
Self sabotage for me is repeating unhealthy habits and phrases in relationships just because it has been a previous cycle. There's like my greatest struggles are not with my peripheral relationships, they're with the ones at home that have like my relationship with my parents is my lifelong manifestation of that child who's trying to become an adult, who never grew up, who's now trying to learn to be an adult. and
Right.
and when something happens really fast, I'm like, whoa, like, where is this little brat coming out from? Like, I mean, I'm, like self sabotage to me looks like me looking at myself say something and wishing I would leave the room. Like I'm like, I don't want to be around that anger. I don't want to be around that negativity. And I don't want to be around that toxicity. I don't want to be a judge of others. I want to be learning how to love completely. And none of those things I just said are anything like that, you know? And, but it also manifests into like, I want to say, like poor decisions, like decisions that I'm still learning about this in the sense that I feel that I reach points in my life where I'll make poor decisions because I'm so desperate to succeed at something that it's like I don't actually put the correct value on what I already have. you know like it can happen in business, it can happen in relationships, it can happen um you know it can happen in not doing the necessary maintenance on things I own. you know like, I mean, if I don't maintain them and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, why is everything breaking around me? Like, it's obvious that I haven't put the proper value into it. And gratitude is an action. So if I'm grateful for something, I care for those relationships, I take care of those items, or I actually take the time that some kind of business decision needs. And so for me, it's it boils down to a sense of self-worth. Like sometimes somebody will lend me something and I'll be caring for it better than my own thing. And I'm like, why am I doing that? You know? And it's obviously because I think that their thing is worth more than mine.
Mm.
You know? So yeah, I think that's my answer to that question. I'm not sure if I answered it correctly, but I sure had
That
fun.
was great. That was great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think for me, I mean, the short answer is me getting in God's way, right? Because, you know, what I've learned in here from being around a few days is that this whole program is about the grace of God. He wants
Mm.
to bless me. He wants to bless my relationships, my work. He wants to better my life. The problem is that I get in the way. Nobody else gets in the way. My wife doesn't get in God's way. Nobody. I'm the one, right? I'm the one
Mm.
that makes this thing harder, that blocks off God. And I think, and the way I can recognize that, or what that looks like to me, is first and foremost, I'm not listening to my sponsor, right? Because this is the guy that I picked to guide me. When I
Yeah.
start to think I don't need to do that, or I don't need to know better, I'm already on the road to sabotage, because this guy is my spiritual advisor, right? And then also not listening to friends around me, right? Because this fellowship, this group, iron sharpens iron. We're stronger in numbers. And so they taught me that early on. When I stopped listening to the people around me that are trying to help me, right? Then I'm in trouble. I mean, if you remember, Bill was on in the very beginning of Bill's story. He said he threw all this stuff on a motorcycle and he went across the country, and he says, my friends thought a lunacy commission could be appointed. My friends were telling me I'm crazy. And he says, yeah, they were probably right, but there I go, right? I don't listen to people, right?
Yeah.
And so when I start not listening to my sponsor, friends around that are trying to help me, I know I'm on the road to self-sabotage.
And probably
And
your intuition.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what that all stems from is me thinking I know best, right?
Mhm.
I can run my own life. I don't need all this help. I've got this. And they taught me early on, right? The first requirement of this program is that Darrin be convinced that any life run on self-will is not going to be successful. So when
Mhm.
I'm running on self-will, then I'm in that self-sabotage mode. And I think the second thing is exactly what you said. When I start making decisions based out of a place of fear, or making decisions based out of a place of self, right? When I
Mhm.
start doing that, then I start blocking the good things that come into my life, right? And the way I know I'm doing that is because I have these goals and these desires, but the decisions I make are going contrary to me achieving those goals and desires, right?
Yeah. I love that. Great answer, brother. Okay, I got another one for you. Chaos can feel familiar, even comforting to those who once lived in constant crisis. How have you learned to live without the adrenaline of drama?
A good question. sometimes I still love the drama, Milan. I've been here almost 20 years, and it's just that there's still something inside of me that sort of is still a little bit more comfortable,
Mm,
arguing with you instead of, sitting down and, having a normal conversation and working things out. That's just sort of innately in my nature as an alcoholic is that, but I can say today, all these years later, I'm less comfortable in the chaos. When I first got here, that's the only way I knew how to operate. And I didn't know, because you touched on it a minute ago in your answer. I didn't know that it wasn't really that I was comfortable with the chaos, is that the chaos gave me an excuse to drink and drug or to act out a certain way, right? I didn't know that. I just thought I was comfortable in the chaos, but the chaos gave me that excuse to go out and drink or drug or whatever. And, but today, even still, like I say, today I have to be careful of being comfortable in that chaos, because I, s- I wish I wish, Milan, that if I would have wrote the book and if I would have did recovery and started all this, it would be different. God would have just lifted out everything and placed me in a position of neutrality away from ego and everything. But unfortunately, that's not how it works.
mm,
He's placed me in this position of neutrality with drugs and alcohol. I don't even think
mm,
about it. But the ego and the pride and all that stuff, that's innately ingrained in me. And so still sometimes, my wife will say something and my first response is, what's her problem? But it's that ego. It's that it's that
mm,
something inside of me that's like, it would be better off here to start a fight than
mm.
to just practice some principles and do. And I have to fight that. And I think, and I'll end with this. I think that the easiest way they taught me early on, and you've probably heard this too, uh, first thought wrong. Right. So I have to get past the first or second thought. And,
Mm,
people say, well, where does the book say that? Well, the book says pause when agitated, right? So it tells me
mm.
my immediate reaction is pride, ego, fear. It's conflict. It's
Fight or
chaos.
flight.
It's, yeah, fight or flight. And so I have to get past that. Okay, stop for a second. Okay, hold on. What's really going on? Why is this bothering you? And when I do that, then I can go tell my wife, hey, that hurt my feelings when you said that, instead of starting this full blown fight with her like I did with my two ex-wives, right? And so it's just that I still have to sometimes make myself step back out of the chaos, right? Because they said the crap is warm until it starts to get smelly, right?
Yeah.
So I like to sit in the crap because it's warm, but then it starts to stink, and so I just have to be really on guard not to fall back into that comfortability with the chaos.
My new sponsor said she spent a lot of time trying to pick up the clean end of a turd.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, okay, so how have I learned to live without the adrenaline of drama? I would say that not entirely successful, but, I was definitely at the high strung end of things with adrenaline in my addiction and alcoholism. And I think one of the things that happened for me was I came out, everybody in the treatment center was smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, lots of coffee. And I mean, you look at the meetings, I mean, I honestly, I find it a very strange juxtaposition that coffee is served, because I really, for myself, had to pull out of coffee pretty much almost entirely. And I just drink tea, like orange pekoe tea now, because it was keeping me in that fight or flight thing. And what I realized is, like, before I would have a coffee in the morning, I could be fine. And then after, I'd be very reactionary. And I would call that very much like that adrenaline of drama. Like I would react before I could have a chance of considering a response. And and for me now, it's like some of that need for adrenaline I've been replacing with lots of exercise, and that has been enough to tire me out. Like you have a lot less need to fight if you wear yourself out. It's like when you have your little kids, or when you have a puppy. Like an unwalked dog. And why is it eating your couch? Well, because it wants to go 25 kilometers and you never took it five. And another thing I think that has been an amazing surprise is that laughter has returned to life, you know, and a good laughing session can be a great adrenaline outlet. I mean, and like until I got in the program, I had no clue what serenity was, and for me, it's like absolutely been this journey of learning about peace and contentment in a way that actually feels good. Like if you had tried to get me to sit calmly and meditate in the last few months of my alcoholism and drug addiction, I wouldn't be able to do it for 5 seconds, man. The hamster wheel in my brain was not built for that. And so part of the way that I feel like I'm reducing that need for that adrenaline or drama is that I'm actually starting to just do enough of and enjoy enough things that are more peace provoking, and starting to really enjoy the benefits of that and the relationships that that's bringing. It's still really a day by day thing where you know, part of my two-way prayer is almost, the two topics that I'm kind of asking the most is how can I deepen my surrender and how can I love more completely? And if you're loving completely, you're not fighting with someone. Like one of the biggest things for me right now is keeping no record of wrongs. Because if I'm mad at you at all, I'm keeping one record of wrong, whatever the heck that resentment is. And it's just like trying to reduce my preference in the moment so that I am freer to actually just enjoy that moment.
That's great. That's really great. All right, here's a good one for you. So, why do we self sabotage our sobriety, our careers, or relationships? Why do we do it?
Well, I can only speak for me, but I'm pretty sure that I was instilled through my own perception with a very low sense of self worth. Like I don't feel there's something inside me that doesn't feel like I deserve things. Like you mentioned something earlier. I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but it reminded me of something that I'm literally working on right now. Is that like it was? Oh, you were talking about your wife, and you were just like, oh, some days, like You're like, what's her problem, right? I have come to see that there's something in me that, like, I grew up in a very rough city. I used to have to fight once a week. I would have to fight to walk across neighborhoods to get home often. So my solution was to respond with an attack. And that literally saved my life as a child. And now what I'm realizing is that I am struggling not to feel attacked by the world. And so then what does that create for me? It creates the elimination. Like I want to stop something as quickly as I can because that's the greatest chance of survival when you're out in the wild. And that does not serve me at all anymore. Like in the 1 in 100,000 instances of my moments of life where I might have to defend my life, you know, like the other 99,999, it's a bad decision. It's a bad decision. But I've come to realize that it's like, that is why I can react like that to people who are obviously not attacking me. Like who obviously, like, if I sit down and I'm like, does my wife love me? Yes. Does my daughter love me? Yes. Why am I reacting like I'm attacked? You know, it's that self-sabotage for me is like a defensive low self-worth strategy that just no longer serves me. And it's something I'm trying to address through prayer, through surrender, and through my step work right now. Well, like it's as I've peeled the onion, I now see this layer, and I see this layer has a lot of rot in it and makes for really a crappy soup if you throw in that rotten onion. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, Milan. And I think that's I think where recovery gets hard like really hard because we
Mm-hmm.
don't realize sometimes how deep the rabbit hole goes. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Bill says that drugs and alcohol weren't the problem. We had to get down to causes and conditions. So you mean there's things that cause me and conditions that set me up to be here? Yeah, that's all my whole life. And so it took me a while to realize exactly what you just said, right? So my mom and dad fought when I was growing up, right? And so it was ingrained in me. I thought that's the way you handle conflict. And so when I got married to my first and second wife, if we had any conflict, we would scream and yell and fight because that's what I knew. I didn't know anything else. So, but I didn't relate that came from my childhood, right? And it's not my mom and dad's fault. They did the best they could do. Who knows what they saw growing up and all that. So there's no blame anywhere. It's just the reality of that I learned this stuff growing up, right? And so I have to really, like you say, peel back the layers and get down to what's really going on, what's causing me to behave like this. You know, my father was an alcoholic, died in this disease. Great man, but he would rather just sit and drink and read his books than play with us. And so, as a grown man, I'm like seeking validation and attention, and because I didn't get that growing up, but I didn't realize that came from the way I was raised up in childhood. So recovery is not easy, right? Right? Recovery, like sobriety is easy, right? You get tapped into the power and got places you physical neutrality. But if you really want to recover from all this past trauma, like you're talking about, to change these things that are ingrained within you, it takes a while and it takes a lot of work. And like you said earlier, I'm glad I've done the work because I'm a better person for it. But it's a lot of hard work to be honest with myself, look at
Mm-hmm.
myself, work on myself, change myself with the help of this power to try to become a better version of me. But anyways, I ranted a little bit on that. Let me get back to the question: why do we self sabotage? And I think the first one that I have is exactly what you said. There's something that just says I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. And I don't know if that's from things that have happened in my childhood growing up, or just maybe some of the horrible things that we did before we got sober. You know, I look at it, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I lied and cheated and stole, and I don't deserve good things today, right? And that's not true. Right. That's not true. Those are things that I did in my addiction. It's not who I am. Right. I'm not a bad father. Yes, I did some things that good fathers don't do when I was in my addiction, but I'm not a bad father. Ask my daughter today, right? It's just like you. You got a daughter that like blessed my heart when I saw you and your daughter reaction at the convention because I have a daughter myself. But I'm sure there was things when you were in your addiction, you weren't a good father. But that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make you not a good father. It's just you did some things that in your addiction that weren't. So I have to like get past all that and be like, look, I do deserve to be happy. I do deserve all these blessings, despite of whatever's happened in my past, right? And that feeds into I'm not good enough, right? I'm not gonna ever, I'm not worthy of all this, right? And goes into maybe I won't live up to all this, maybe if I get all this, I won't be what they're expecting me to be. Maybe I can't pull off being a good guy and a sober guy and all, so there's fear in that. And then I think the biggest thing, Milan, is protecting myself from being hurt. So me and my wife had this conversation. My wife's been sober for 19 years, uninterrupted, one desire chip, very godly woman, very into recovery. And we were having this conversation earlier. And when we first met, we started dating. When things started getting serious, she started trying to push me away. And I'm like, hold on, I'm doing everything right. I'm loving this woman. I'm doing it. Why is she trying to push me away? And the answer was, and we didn't, neither one of us knew this at the time because we were early in sobriety, like less than a year. But today because we've done a lot of work on ourselves, she's like, I was trying to protect myself from being hurt. And I knew if I got too close then I would be vulnerable and you could break my heart if you left or whatever. So I think that's the thing probably we have to watch out the most for in self-sabotage is that protecting ourselves. Because here's the thing, Milan, the ego has a job, right? The ego's job is to protect me, just exactly what you were talking about not getting beat up as a kid, right? The ego's job is to protect you. Hey, don't let these people push you around. Don't let them talk to you, because then you're going to get beat up, right? That the ego is there to try to help me. The problem with the ego, because it doesn't distinguish, like you said, the 99.9% of the time when my life is not threatened, it just perceives everything as a threat. And so it self-sabotages me through this guise of protecting myself, right? And I'm grateful that my wife did that work and I did the work and didn't allow her to push me away. And we've been married for coming up on 16 years, happily married. But that's what I've always got to watch out for, is this fear of protecting myself, right?
You're done?
I'm done.
Okay. I thought you were going to say something. Like one thing that you just said there is, and I really think it's true. It's like, there's a fear, I think, that either that our best isn't good enough, or that we're going to get exposed as fakes. Like, if we ruin our like, if we sabotage our success before we get there, we always have that sabotage as the excuse. If we actually wholeheartedly try our best, no self-sabotage, and we fail, it just shows we're not good enough. And I think there's a massive fear hiding behind that right there. Like, I think that's a really, really huge one, because it makes it so nobody can ever say we weren't good enough, because we have a scapegoat that we have created to pull us out of the running for whatever it is we're trying for. Whether it's that job, whether it's that girl, whether it's that home, whatever it is, it's just like, oh, well, I don't have that because of this. And, oh, this happened. If this didn't happen, I probably would have beat him on that job. And I think that there's a massive part of us that is like protecting our ego. It's like the ego's ego, you know?
I like that. The ego's ego. I probably think my ego has an ego that has an ego, right? It's
Yeah. But it
but
is,
no,
though. It's like the ego's getting protected.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
you're exactly right, Milan. And I think what we don't talk about enough in this program, and I don't know why we don't talk about it enough, right? Because you're 100% right. Everything that you just said is 100% right. But what we don't talk about, Bill says in the literature, the first 100, right? Sometimes when I try and I fail, that's the greatest gift of all, because out of that, I'll learn how to be better. But we don't talk about that enough in recovery. So I don't want to try
We don't
because
talk
I'm going
about
to
that
fail.
enough in school. We don't like
Everywhere.
like
Yeah.
like you are not rewarded in school for taking a chance and failing. You're just shit shamed for having crappy marks. You know,
Absolutely.
I never
Yeah.
learned that making mistakes was good until I came into the program. And then I went to 13 years of grade school in Ontario and 4 years of university. Like, nobody ever said making mistakes is how I learn. Not once to me. Yeah.
So maybe that's another show on the line.
I'm writing it down. The value of making mistakes. Okay, I've got another question for you. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
The Big Book warns that unchecked resentment and fear breed self destruction. What tools help you stop resentments before they turn into sabotage?
Oh man, that's a really good question,
I load
Milan.
them up
Well, the
for you,
first,
baby.
yeah, right. You did good. These are some good ones. I think for me, I mean, just let's stop for a second. Let's think about this, Milan. Every
Mhm.
time that and you've been around for a little while now too, every time you hear somebody that's relapsed, it always starts, or why does it always start with, I stopped calling my sponsor? Why doesn't it start with, oh, I got a job? It's always, I stopped calling my sponsor.
Yeah.
Because that's the guy, right? That if I'm not confessing what's going on to somebody and I'm harboring these things, that's where the resentment leads to chaos and it becomes problematic, right? And so for me, I don't have too much resentment. No, let me back that up. I don't have too much resentment for long. Let me say that. Because if I get a
Yeah.
resentment, I'm calling my sponsor and we're processing this stuff and we're talking through this stuff. That is my number one tool, right? Because there's something about when I talk to my sponsor, like I can be mad at my boss and I call my sponsor. He's like, well, hold on, did you look at this? Well, no, I didn't really look at that because I was angry here. Did you? And he helps me get back to reality, right? Because
Mm,
here's the thing, Milan. This is recovery versus non-recovery. Is I have a disease that wants me to live in false reality, and I have a solution that wants me to live in reality. It's just that simple. But I can't get to the reality because I'm stuck in the false reality, right? Because I created the false reality because this guy's not doing what I want him to do, or whatever the case may be. So what I immediately do is, well, the first thing I do is I pray, God help me, right? Because this is what the 10th step says. It
yeah.
says, ask God to help me. Then the next thing I do is I call my sponsor, right? And then I try to, how can I help other people? I just follow that clear cut outline in the 10th step. But talking to my sponsor and processing and working through this seems like always immediately just releases the resentment. Now, if it's something that's big, then maybe we have to do a little work. Maybe we have to do a 4 step. Maybe we have to process a little longer on what's really going on. But that process of talking to all the stuff with my sponsor relieves me of the resentment and the chaos.
Yeah. I love that. Great. I love talking recovery with you, brother. I'm really glad you're back here. It soothes my soul. So, what tools help me stop resentments before they turn into sabotage? So, I want to tell a little story. Um, you've heard of Sandy Beach? You know, he was an old timer in AA, and he had early on in his recovery heard a story about somebody whose child was murdered, and this person like forgave immediately. And this was like mind blowing to him. It was super impactful. Then he saw another example where a newscaster had rushed up to this mother who just had a child murdered, looking for like the big pity party for this lady and everything. And the lady just said, "Oh, I've already forgive them," and like ruin the news thing. And so this happened 3 times in his life. And in 2005 or something like that, it happened to his daughter. Somebody brutally murdered his daughter. And so he had like been thinking about this, like I think for like 50 or 60 years by now. This was a big thing. And so he forgave the person. And his whole thing was that, the sooner you can forgive, the less paperwork there is, right? Like and that lack of forgiveness leads to the resentment, leads to the shortcoming, leads to the needing an amends, leads to the needing the inventory, leads to the amends. Like it just like, but if we just forgive, you know? And so it's just something that I've been thinking about ever since I heard his talk on it. And really like the tools of like surrender and acceptance and love in this program, they're the ways for me to get away from that self-sabotage. And quite honestly, do the faster I step 10 myself, like I might not have that angelic like forgiveness that it showed. Well, I mean, man, that's a magical mother effing forgiveness right there, dude. Like someone kills my girl, there's going to be a few moments of not forgiveness, right? And but I know that I can make it to a step 10, you know, and in that step 10 I can turn my moments around there. So I think that it's using these tools that we have, like quite frankly, I mean, praying for that guidance, and taking a moment to listen for the answer, seeing our motivation behind, like questioning that motivation about that action we're about to take that would sabotage us, right? It's like, what is my motivation here? Is it coming from, honest, pure, unselfish, loving? Probably not. even if it's not those to me, you know? Yeah.
That's great. I love that, the praying, because my sponsor have had to do that a few times over the year. Pray for the guy, right? And I'm like, I don't really want to pray for the guy. I want to go cuss the guy out or whatever.
Yeah.
And so pray for the guy. And then inevitably, every time I pray for the guy, 3 or 4 days in for praying good things for this guy, whatever problem that I have just went away. I don't even know what it even was anymore. So I love that we forget about
Mhm.
that power of prayer, especially praying for the guy that I have a resentment again. But I always love coming on your show because, sometimes when you've been around here a long time, you think you've heard it all, but I
Mm.
always hear something, a little nugget I can take with me. Last time it was the billboards of the highway. I love that. This time, that's the first time I've heard that. A lot less paperwork. I love that because
Yeah.
my sponsor says that, but I never really like put the two together. He says, I don't, I don't, I try to not do things and offend people or get in it, not because I'm this great spiritual person, because I don't like to make the amends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like that. It's a lot less paperwork, right?
Yeah. You're nipping the paperwork in the bud right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I got another question
I'm
for
ready.
you. Why do we deliberately manufacture chaos? Because the book says stay away from the deliberate manufacturing of chaos. Why do we do it?
Well, I think, okay. I mean, if I look at my life of up to now, right? I think that alcohol and drugs create an element of chaos through those times where we're really not in control of ourselves physically or mentally or whatever. And I think that in some ways we become comfortable reacting in those realms. Like if you take a non-alcoholic or non-addict and you throw them in the middle of chaos, you and me are going to swim right through that chaos like it's nothing, and those people are going to be like, what the hell's going on? And it's like it becomes one of the areas that we're probably strong in. Like we literally gain a skill at 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 getting through the chaos. So then when you take away the alcohol or the drugs, what are we left with, right? We're definitely not good at serenity. I had never met Serenity. Like Serenity might have come knocking at my door, and I was like, "No one home. Dave's not here right now." like I and so it's it's like a familiarity that it's like a coping mechanism. Where can I cope the best? Well, where have I coped the most? In chaos, and so now it's really like recalibrating what I want, what feels good, and how to relearn that as a baseline inside my own chemical structure. You know, like right now, I follow a really fairly regimented pattern in my life. I get up, I do my gratitudes. I do my two-way prayer. I go out. I start my exercising. Inside that, I just do my vocal prayer. I go through all my exercise. If there's time, I do music. If there's time, I'm doing a podcast. And, and then I go to my meetings. I go do my work. I work with my sponsees, rinse, repeat. Like I'm literally having to rebuild and retrain myself. One of my friends who's new to the program as well, it's like we say that we're growing up inside the program now. Like if your emotional development gets stunted at the time you started substances, well, I'm a 13-year-old man in a 53-year-old body trying to figure out how to live like a man now and a man that I want to be around. So it's like that chaos was just the personality trait that got developed and got really strong. And now it's like that doesn't serve me, just like that feeling like I'm attacked and striking back doesn't. So I'm having to just reprogram my whole life. Yeah.
I love that. that recalibration, that's recovery, is recalibration. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like when, I'm at work, sometimes I print something on my printer and it's blurry, and I'm like, oh, I got to realign the printer. So I have to print that realignment page and put it in there
Yeah.
and realign the printer. And then when the page comes out, it's not blurry anymore. That's a lot like recovery, exactly what you're
Mhm.
talking about. I'm trying to retrain my mind, recalibrate my soul, unlearn bad information like you talked about before, and fill it with new good information. So I love that. Uh, so the answer to the question, why do we deliberately manufacture chaos? And you talked about it. We talked about it earlier. It's comfortable, right? I mean, peace is uncomfortable for me when I get here, Milan. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, what's going on? And my sponsor's like, hey, that's peace, bro. And I'm like you, it's like so foreign. I'm like, what is that? I think it's boredom. I think it's no, it's peace. But it's just so foreign to me, and the chaos is comfortable. And I'm fighting with my wife or doing whatever. I'm good at this. This is what I'm comfortable at. I was the king of comebacks. I knew what to say in a fight. I knew how to hurt you. I mean, I'm comfortable in that chaos. I'm not comfortable just sitting here in the peace. And so, if that's true early on, and I recalibrate myself, so to speak, when I get later in recovery, I got to have to be vigilant of not going back to that, deliberately manufacturing that, so I get back to this place of comfortability, right? And two, Milan, I think you said this earlier. It's the only way I know how to operate. All I am is just the sum total of all the experiences I've been through in my life, right? And
Mm.
so I don't know any other way, right? Like you were talking about the way you were raised, the way I was raised. It's just I don't know any other way to operate, right? And that's why recovery is about being open-minded to change, so I can learn a new way to operate, right? And then I think too is when I start running my life on my character defects instead of on these principles, when I start letting the ego take control instead of God taking control, right? Then I'll start to deliberately manufacture this chaos. But the main reason, Milan, and I think you talked about it a little bit, is I don't like change. I fear change, even if the change is good, right? And so that can be problematic, right? Comfortability, right, is the enemy of spiritual growth, right?
Yeah.
Being comfortable in this job is the enemy to me getting a better job or whatever. But I don't like the change. For whatever reason, I'm fearful of the change. It's and so I don't have a whole lot of issues today in recovery because I try to practice this thing and work this thing. But the times that I have big issues is when somebody changes something, right? Because I'm sort of
Mm.
like you. I got this routine. I go to a certain number of meetings a week, every week. I work with these sponsees. I go to the treatment center on Friday. This is what I do every week. And then when somebody changes something about the meeting that I go to, or the treatment center says we can't do this or do this now, then I get all thrown off. Why? Because I'm comfortable in that situation. But maybe, Milan, like we talked about before, maybe the change is going to make things better for me. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
supposed to go through this because God's got something better for me, but I don't want to because I'm comfortable with it. And so it's like you talked about before, if I deliberately manufacture the chaos, then maybe I don't have to change. Maybe I can
Mm.
stay in this comfortability and not have to change and grow.
You know, when I started going down the path of acceptance, like I have the word acceptance tattooed on my arm here, because it became really apparent to me that there was a lack of acceptance in my life. So it's a stark reminder. But in that Living Clean book there, the NA literature, it takes it one step further, and it's like, now envision, instead of acceptance, you actually are embracing the constant state of change. That's like acceptance with a smile. you know, and I think that in the ideal growth pattern, that's what I would like to go towards. I have a good friend, and she's like, there's only two things. She's like, there's the lessons and the blessings, and she's like, I got to have gratitude for both. you know and I love that, because it's it it encompasses it all. It encompasses the uncomfortability and the things you're comfortable for, you know? And to be able to approach that with positivity, either one, means that, you know, that your perception is not fighting against your state of being, really.
And that's problematic for the alcoholic because I'm instant gratification. So I
Mhm.
just want the blessings. I don't want the
Yeah.
lessons.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, then I stay stuck and I don't ever grow without the
Mhm.
lessons. So I really like that, the blessings and the lessons.
Yeah, I like, ever since she said that at a meeting, I was like, I'm like, I like that. I'm like, this is something that I've got to look at, you know? Okay, so self honesty is the antidote to self sabotage. Which tools help you stop resent? Oh no, hold on. How has fearless self inventory protected your growth? How has fearless self inventory protected your growth?
That's really deep, Milan, because the book tells me very beginning that the people that don't recover that can't be honest with themselves. And we automatically think that's about drugs and alcohol when it is in step one. But if I can't get honest about my finances, I'm not going to get better financially. If I can't get honest about what's going on in my marriage, then my marriage is not going to get better. It's the whole life structure is me being able to be honest with myself, which therefore becomes problematic because I lie to myself all the time and I don't know how to be honest before I get here. So that's why I have to grasp. That's why he uses these two words, right? Don't ever forget these words, especially if you're new. Grasp. Grasp means I don't know nothing about honesty, so I have to grasp it, and then I have
Yep.
to develop it because it's not normal to me. So he said I have to grasp and develop this manner of living which demands rigorous honesty, and so that is to me the essential key, right? Self-searching, leveling of our pride, confession of our shortcomings, right? If I don't get honest with myself about what's going on, I am never going to level my pride and tell my sponsor. I'm
Hmm.
never going to level my pride and tell my support group, right? And so to me, man, that question is probably the deepest question that you've ever asked. It is the central key component of recovery. Can I look inward and get
Hmm.
honest? Because here's the thing. Milan, I had to learn this early on. This is one of the things that is ingrained in my brain is I have a disease that wants to focus outward. I have a solution that wants to focus inward. My first thing is, why is Milan looking at me like that? Why did he say that? What did he mean by that? Why is he talking to me this way? It's always looking outward, right? I'm always looking outward. Instead of recovery says, okay, hold on, why did that bother me? Right? What's really going on with me? Is there something that I had, and so that's a great, great question. That may be another topic for another podcast about this honesty, about learning how to be honest with myself and honest with others. But it literally, like you said, it is the antidote to the self-sabotage and the chaos. If I can get honest with myself and then level that pride and get honest with my sponsor and another and my support group.
I love that. How has fearless, I was just writing that potential topic down, by the way. I keep a list while we go. Okay. How has fearless self inventory protected my growth? Now, you know, I have always said it's the moral inventory that makes me fearless. You know, when they say a searching and fearless more, it literally, it dispels so many delusions, you know, and and it's through that honesty, you know, and those delusions are dispelled by an awareness of what the actual action that I am doing is, what my part in it is, how, you know, like it's like instead of me just going, well, Darren's a dick because he said that, you know, like that there just lets me be resentful with no questioning, no ownership, no nothing. Next time I see Darren, I'm like, hey, he's still a dick. He'd say that again. Like, and it could have been, you could have been like, hey, you know, you hurt Marie when you said it like that. You could have been actually trying to help me with something. And I was just like, all he does is criticize me, you know? And having an awareness that you were merely trying to help me not hurt another person. And you might have had my very best interest at heart. But without that honesty, without that, like, without the ability to go into that inventory and just use these tools and the charts and like, because I think I think until you've got like the chart and the pattern memorized, it's worth it to do the paperwork because it just doesn't let you hide behind anything. You know, when I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. And that thought fleets and goes away, and now I'm on to another moment. It's not the same as having that written down, looking at a resentment, coming back the next day maybe, and I'm going to take another look at that inventory of mine. And it's there and it's broken down, and it's like, it has a validity and a permanence, and that allows me to actually use it as a reference point for change, because the only way that I'm actually growing is by not decaying. Like stagnancy still isn't growing. Like autopilot or just being automatic. And so for me, it is a situation of grow or die, and that's like it is a life-threatening illness I have, and I have to keep fighting against it. And that's it.
I know I love that, Milan. No, so like I said, I've been here a long time, and I've never one time God has not come said, "Hey, Darrin, go do this or don't do that." Right? That would probably freak me out if that happened. Right? The way God speaks to me is He speaks to me through other people. Now, every once in a while, I'll get like an intuitive thought, right, to where it's like an internal, that still small voice. But more times than not, God speaks through people, and so you're spot on. If I'm not listening to other people, right? If I'm not open minded to what other people are telling me, like this guy, like you said, you hurt Marie when you said that. If I just immediately go into defense mode, into my ego, into my alcoholism, and say, "Oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about," or whatever, then I'm missing a growth opportunity from God. If I can
Hmm.
say, "Hold on, is there any validity?" Because that's the first thing I have to say: is there any validity? Because some people are just mean, some people are just critical, right? And so
Hmm.
everybody that speaks to me doesn't have validity. So I first ask myself, is there validity there? If there's validity there, you know what? I probably could have said that a little nicer to Marie. Then I need to look inward and say, okay, God, what is the lesson? What are you trying to teach me? How are you
Hmm.
trying to make me better? Do I owe Marie an amends? And I think so. I love that you said that, is being open to letting God speak through other people truth in my life about me. Right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that's happened, and like I think since we talked, is I've been doing this two-way prayer, and one of the things that I do is I read that First Corinthians 13 about love, and quite often, almost every morning before in the midst of doing that. And one of the things that I learned and realized was that like love encompasses all the other principles. If we learn to love completely, we have compassion, we have honesty, we have everything. And so it's kind of like simplified my program a bit on focusing on trying to love more completely. Yeah. Is
All
it
right.
my turn
I
to
got a
ask a
hard.
question or your question?
I think it's my turn. I
Yeah,
think.
I think it is too.
I think it's back to me. And I got a deep, hard, philosophical question for you. Ready?
Okay.
Do we really have the power to sabotage our lives if God is guiding us?
Yes, we do. I think we do. And I think it can happen to help us learn different lessons, sometimes. But, we're given these tools, we're given this heart, we're given this choice, and we actually, I think, I think that I don't think it's all fated. I do think that there's an element to us. We're given these vessels, we're given these spirits, and it's kind of like we're the salmon swimming back to the source where we're going to go lay our eggs. But I don't think that every fish makes it. you know, and if you look at, every addict, every alcoholic doesn't make it. Not every person makes it all the way to what we would call like a long life, right? And so I definitely think that there's an element of choice involved there. And uh, for me, it was like, I am forever grateful that I got to the program before dying. That's it.
No, that's a great answer, Milan. And the reason I asked that question, I asked that question specifically because a lot of times, especially with the new guy, you'll hear them make statements, especially if they're halfway through the steps, they got 9 months, 6 months, and they have some kind of a spiritual awakening. You'll hear them make these claims like, well, yeah, that's God is guiding me. That's what God wanted. Hold on. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that God wanted you to sit on your fourth step for 2 months. I don't know that that's what, right. So I can use everything like, oh, this is God's will. This is God is doing this and all
Mm-hmm.
that. Like that. I don't have the ability to self-sabotage myself. And it's just not true. It's just exactly what you said. It's just not true. I absolutely do. And so this is what I have to understand. So in the third step, it says I, right? Now it says we, but when
Mm-hmm.
I'm working the steps, it's me, right?
Yeah.
I make a decision. I make a decision to turn my will over to God's will or not. So if I don't make that conscious decision and I keep my own self will, then I absolutely have the ability to self sabotage myself. All right, I like the page 417, even though a lot of old timers don't like that, right? The acceptance is the answer to all
Yeah.
my problems. I
Yeah.
believe that. And in that, it says absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. So sometimes the newcomer can take that and like, well, everything that's happening is supposed to be. No, if I'm not in God's world, then it is a mistake. If I'm not doing
Yeah.
his will, I can manufacture this chaos
Mm-hmm.
and deliberately sabotage my life, right? And another part of the book, Milan, because I think we put too much emphasis on just God. Now, don't get me wrong, I can't do any of this without his grace and mercy, right? He did for me what I can't do for myself. But I went to church for years and years and years saying just God, and God never did nothing for me. And so when I got the program, it's like, no, it's not just God, it's this cooperation, you
Mm-hmm.
cooperating with God, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to understand that it says I have to get rid of this selfishness, and I had to have God's help. It's help is the key word. God's not going to come and just make me
Mm-hmm.
unselfish, make me do all, make everything work out right, not let me make mistakes, not let me sabotage. He's going to help me, but that
Mm-hmm.
help, right? Just to the extent the book says, just to the extent that I do his work and stay close to him, then he will enable me to match calamity with serenity. Then he will do
Mm-hmm.
these things. But if I'm not in his will and I'm doing my own thing, I absolutely have the ability to sabotage my life. Now, with that being said, I do believe I serve a God big enough that even when I mess up and I'm out of his will and sabotage something, that he still comes back in and tries to make it right and help me get back on the path because he's loving and he has grace and mercy. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that everything in my life was supposed to be his will, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think his will for me was to relapse coming up on 4 years sober. Now, was that the best thing that happened to me? Did he take that bad situation and use it to good and help me? Yeah, because he's gracious and he's loving and he loves me. But his will was that I stayed sober 19 continuous years like my wife, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
got out of his will, started into self will, and I broke that. And so that leads me to the last thing. I need to understand what defeats me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people say, oh, it's self. It's self defeats me. No, that's not what the literature says. It's not self, it's self manifested. That's
Mm-hmm.
totally different, Milan. So here's what that looks like. So say you're at work, your boss does something, you get this thought in your mind, I should just go cuss him out and quit this job. That does not hurt you. The self is not what hurts you.
Mm-hmm.
What hurts you is if you let that self manifest out and you go cuss him out and quit that job, right?
Yeah.
So it's the self manifested, right? And so if I let the self manifest, even if I'm
Mm-hmm.
following God and He's in control and I'm doing all that, then the manifestation of that self
Mm-hmm.
could cause this deliberate chaos and sabotage that's outside of God's will for me. So the key for me in recovery is because I still have self. It's still there. It's
Hmm.
alive and kicking even after all these years. But I try not to let the self manifest out. Sort of like we talked about earlier. I pause, I pray, I don't let but I'm still have those thoughts and I'm still full of self. I just try not to let them bleed out. I may still be like, you know, this guy's a jerk for saying that to me. That may still be my
Hmm.
first thought, but I don't let that manifest out. I don't say that
Hmm.
to him. I'm like, okay, hold on. Is he, does it have validity? Do I need to look at something? So I
Hmm.
don't let that self manifest out.
I love that. Okay, I've got another question for you. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. Um, Chaos is often a signal that we've drifted from spiritual principles. What signs tell you it's time to realign with your program?
A good question. It's sort of like what we just talked about, what I just talked about before. But the first thing I like to remember, and somebody said this early on, I still hear it in meetings all the time, and I try to practice it. They say if I don't get away from the basics, then I don't have to go back to the basics, right? So I
Yeah.
try to stay in the basics. But nonetheless, I am human and get caught up in all this stuff. So I think for me, right, because I ask this question to my sponsees all the time, right? How do you know if you're spiritually fit? Right? Because the book says I have a daily reprieve from the drugs and alcohol, from my alcoholism, by the maintenance of my spiritual condition. So how do I know if I'm spiritually fit? What is that gauge like you're talking about of whether I'm on the beam or off the beam? And if you ask somebody in recovery that question, you'll get 5,001 answers. But to
Mm.
me, there's only one answer. Am I fighting somebody or something? Because step 10 says, by this time I will have ceased fighting anything and everybody. And that God places me in this position of neutrality as long as I stay spiritually fit. So that's the gauge for me. Am I fighting somebody? Am I fighting my wife? Am I fighting my job? Am I not at peace somewhere? And I
Mm.
get that way. But if I get to this place where, you know what, I got no peace in this area, then I need to look at that. I need to talk to my sponsor. I need to see what's going on. We need to do some work on that because I believe, like you said earlier, my higher power wants me to be in a state of perpetual peace and perpetual joy and happiness. Now, I'm not always going to be there because I'm human and I got all this ego that has an ego, right? But that's where he wants me to be. And so if I'm not there, if I don't have peace about something, if I'm fighting something, then that is my measuring stick, if you will. Okay, something's not right. I need to talk to my sponsor. I need to pray. I need to do some work to get back on this peace, if you will, of not fighting something or somebody.
I
Hope that
love that.
answered your question.
I think it's absolutely great. And so, how or what signs tell me it's time to realign with my program? Well, like I would say, maybe not as eloquently as you just did, but when unmanageability creeps into my life, when I'm feeling like things are unmanageable, when I'm having conflicts with others, and when I get feelings of dis-ease, like when there's something in my intuition that's like, that's not the right thing, sneaky Milan, you know, and then because of doing that two-way prayer, it kind of goes. You gauge your responses against the four absolutes, which are like honesty, purity, unselfishness, and loving. And it's like, man, if things that I'm doing are dishonest, impure, selfish, or unloving, right there, I know it's time for me to be recalibrating. And quite frankly, you know, it says right in it, nobody has perfect adherence to these principles. And I do think though, you can't get yourself in a state of constantly beating yourself up. Like I just want to say for a newcomer out there, it's like we're all learning. Like you may aim towards perfection, but don't kill yourself every time some little thing happens. Just recalibrate and retry again. I just think it's really important. I see a lot of people, and it's just like, you know, this self sabotage, a very topic today, is the reason that they go back out, because they can't give themselves any grace to have a learning period to change their lives, you know? That's it for me on that one.
No, that's great, man. That's one of my big things that I say all the time at meetings, especially if I'm in a meeting of newcomers, is that the highest level I'm ever going to achieve in this program is human. That's all I'm ever.
Yeah.
I'm going to be human. I got to cut myself a break, right? One of my sponsees says, "Get off the cross. We need the wood." Right? Stop
Mm.
beating yourself up.
Yeah.
Right? So, but you're right. Is if when I'm new, it's hard sometimes not to do that. Okay, next question for you. What can we do to not self-sabotage our lives?
Woo. Well, okay. I think if we actually are doing our honest inventories, right? We can we can have an awareness, like we can build an awareness towards what we actually want to be. You know, like one of the things that in my treatment center that we did at step 6 was, you know, if you have your like list of defects, right? And it's like, well, what's the opposite of that? You know, and, you know, like, am I like fear going to faith, anger going to love, and things like that? Like, we can actually create like, destinations for like our transformation, and quite frankly pray for them, you know, like having being able to see, like that awareness is the first step to change. Even if our higher power is doing all of the work in the removal of the defects or shortcomings, and we're doing nothing, we're still the ones creating that inventory. We're still the ones putting it out there and praying for that change. Like we play a part through awareness that is integral, because if we're just all fine and dandy with being a murderous, angry person, then that's never going to change, right? Like it starts with us asking for that. And you know, one of the things for myself, you know, like I had a friend who just celebrated 2 years, and he told a really amazing story at his cake. He said he went and got put into treatment by his wife, or not his wife, his mom and his 2 daughters, and he had nothing. Like he didn't want to be there. His first prayers were for willingness alone, just willingness to be there and to change. And his first prayer was answered. And I thought that that was something that more newcomers need to hear, is that, you know, like sometimes you might not even have that basic willingness, but if you pray, that can come, you know?
Oh, that's great. I'm glad that you said that we create our destination. I know a lot of people in this program don't like that because everybody's always all, God does everything. God does everything. No, I went to church and taught in the church and knew the Bible backwards and forwards for many, many years before I got sober. And God does not do everything. I promise you, He does not do everything, Milan.
Yeah.
I have a part to play in that.
Yeah.
And so, what the book says is it says, if they are to recreate their lives, who is they? That's me. Hold on, I'm recreating my life? I thought God was doing this. No, God is only doing for me the things that I can't do for myself. He's not going to do the things for me that I can. I'm the one that has to learn to be patient with my wife and not be ugly to her and say things back. God's not going to come and make me say nice things and make me, right? He could, I guess, if he wanted to, but that's not the way this thing works, right?
Mm.
So I think that sometimes people ask me sometimes, and I love church. I read the Bible, you know, all that. So don't get me wrong. But people ask me sometimes, what's the difference between this program and church? And I tell them it's real easy. There's no step 6 in church. It's just that God's just going to take it all away. God's just going to do it. No, I have to be entirely ready. I have to do my part to clear away the crap so
Mm.
that the grace of God, the free gift, can come in.
Mm.
So I'm
Mm.
the one that has to try to speak nicer to my wife. I'm the one that has to try to have that awareness and do all that to create this husband that God wants me to be. And then he does the things for me that I can't. He changes my wife's heart. He does other things. And this cooperation with me doing my part and him doing his part is where recovery happens. So that's sort of a little side rant, but back to the question. So what can we do to not self-sabotage our lives? Right. Obviously, the first one, right, is to follow God's will and not self will. Because in the very, very beginning, he says, right, I had to quit playing God. It doesn't work. And let me tell you, Milan, I love that job sometimes. Still, I want to play God. I want to control the world. If everybody would just do what I want them to do, everything would be great. It's still my great. I don't battle drugs and alcohol anymore. They've been removed from me. I battle not trying to play God. It's like, okay.
You battled
Okay,
Darrin.
God. Yeah, I battle Darrin. But innately, the not even just Darrin, the Darrin that wants to control everything. I got to control the outcomes. I got to control what you say, how you act, the control, right? So I got to surrender that control and try to do God's will, not mine, right? And the way that I do that is I follow these principles. You know, they told me in step 12, practice these principles. And there's times I don't want to. I don't want to go make amends, or I don't want to be honest with my sponsor, or I don't want to be kind to this guy that's not being kind to me. But that's what they taught me to do. So I just follow these principles. And it's something that we talked about before, that I talked about before a little bit, is I allow my sponsor and my friends to help me make my decisions. You know, there's a part of the book that says, you know, I'm going to listen. I'm going to take in everything Milan is giving me advice. But at the end of the day, the decision is going to be mine. I'm not, you know, I have to lose that attitude. I have to lose that attitude and start like allowing other people to help me. Right? Maybe something Milan is going to tell me can help me and make me a better person and grow closer to God. I got to be receptive to that, right? And then here's one, we talked about this early. I have to realize that I deserve the good things because God and the people around say that I do, whether I feel like I do or not, right? There's a lot of people that are undeserving this program that have all these blessings. Why not me? I deserve that too. And so I got to get out of this mindset, like we talked about earlier, that I don't deserve these good things. And lastly, and I think this, I don't think even came from the program, Milan. I think this was a pastor preached this at a sermon one time, but it doesn't really matter where it came from because the book says we use all wherever it comes from. If it's good, we use it, right? But he said, if I do the action, the mind will follow. And so no wonder my whole life has been screwed up, is because if my mind doesn't want to do it, I don't do it. So I got everything backwards, right? And so that's why I'm constantly self-sabotaging my life. In recovery, I just do the action. If I don't really want to go meet, I got 5 sponsees in the book right now. Don't ask me how that happened, but it's a little much. I usually
Yeah,
just
I
do
had
like two,
5 at
two.
one point, and
Yeah,
5 was
it's a lot.
5 gets
It's a
almost
lot.
borderline unmanageable.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I just do the action. And then somehow or another, God works out the time, and it all works out, and my mind follows, right? And so
Yep.
I've gotten into this thing of where I just do, I don't, they told me willingness and want to have nothing to do with each other. So whether I want to or not, I just do it. I just do it. And then by the action, the mind follows. It's sort of like this. Milan, have you ever been like, "Man, I'm tired. I don't want to go to this meeting," or you're not in a good place and you don't want to go to this meeting, but you just go to the meeting, and then when you come out of the meeting, you're like, "Man, that's great. I'm glad I came to this meeting."
Yeah.
The mind just follows the action, right? And so it's a guiding principle for me, whether I want to or feel like it or whatever. I just do the next right thing, if you will, do the action, and then my mind will come along.
You know, the what you were saying about the meeting, that happens in like, oh, doing my exercise, eating the right food, but it's like that's where discipline and commitment create freedom, right there. You know, like that is the turning point between the self-sabotage and the freedom, right? It's like bringing discipline and commitment into your life as spiritual principles, right? And that's something that before I listened to the voice that said don't, you know. I was like the one that's like, oh man, you don't need to finish this exercise. You've done 15 minutes, man. What is 45 minutes ever going to do for you? You know, like that's something that like every single day. every single day I have that voice being like, "Hey," I call it the Grimer worm tongue. If you've ever read the Lord of the Rings, it's like the Grimer worm tongue of my life. There, are you ready for a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, um, we sabotage ourselves when we confuse excitement with purpose. How do you tell the difference between healthy passion and destructive thrill seeking?
Well, I'm old now, so I don't have too much destructive thinking. But when I got here, I did. Yeah, I don't know, Milan. I think for me, man, and maybe I'm different than a lot of people. Even though I've been doing this a long time, man, I still don't trust my thinking. I still don't trust my motivation. I still am 100% aware that I run on alcoholism and stinking thinking and spiritual malady all the time. Right now, I'm better than I was when I got here, obviously, but I'm constantly like running things by my sponsor, like, and he'll. So why are you doing that? Is that a little obsessive, or maybe you need to cut? So I try to like really seek guidance from other people because I'm not really a good judge of if I'm if it's destructive or if it's healthy, right? Because I'm an addict and I'm all in on everything, and so I
Yeah.
can get caught up in something that's like, even like a sport or whatever it is, and take that to the extreme and make it unhealthy, even if it's a good thing and there's nothing wrong with it, right?
Mm.
And turn that into an obsession and a problem. So I don't really try to, and again, this is just me. I don't try to gauge too much of that at all. I use my sponsor and use other people around me. I let my wife tell me, hey, hold on, you're being a little bit
Mm.
obsessive about that or whatever, right?
Mm.
I take that in and I'm like, okay, and I take a look at that. And so, yeah, I'm not sure how much that answered your question, but I like to let other people be my voice instead of what my
Mm.
crazy mind tells me most of the time.
One of the things for this podcast is that the questions serve as a starting point for inspiration. Where, it's not like answer the question perfectly because sometimes somebody will ask a question and it makes me think of something else. And to be quite honest, I feel like I'm being guided to saying that other thing, and that's just what it is. So never worry about like responding directly to what I'm saying. A response is good enough. Yeah. So, how do I tell the difference between healthy passion and destructive thrill seeking? I mean, I'm definitely getting older and like, I've had back surgery. So, but I mean, there is still like healthy passions. Like for me, like what you were talking about exercise. Like I I still have the propensity to hurt myself with too much of a good thing. Like I have to force myself to take rest days. Or like, and a good example is I started doing pull-ups when I was younger. I did pull-ups before I had back surgery to strengthen myself for the surgery. So I was like, okay, well, I'm straight now. I'm going to start doing some pull-ups. And I started, and I worked myself up to a ridiculous number last fall. Like I think I was getting back up to like 150 a day or something stupid, and I wrecked my shoulder doing it, and now I can't do any, but it taught me a lesson about like mortality and really where I'm at, and that it's like be careful because it's more important for me to be playing the long game of health than to just have bursts of completely destroying one body part at a time, and so I would say that you know the difference between a healthy passion and not is, first of all, am I hurting myself with the extent I'm doing it at? Am I hurting others? And then, like you were saying, what is my motivation? Is my motivation to increase my health, or is this just some kind of ego vanity thing, right? Or like, I want to show off, like, look at me, I'm still young, or something like that, and now, like, you know, my big thing right now is fast walking. Like, whoa, look at me go. I don't have the poles yet. Let me say, I don't have the poles yet, but I'm not too far off, I'm sure. If I got injured in some way, I would have the poles, but the thing about it is that it really makes me feel alive to do it. And one thing that I'm realizing for myself is that the health of my body completely creates the texture of the health of my mind. And if my blood is not flowing and I'm not well rested and I'm not eating the right kind of foods, I am guaranteed self-sabotaging in some way or not, you know? And the more that I'm taking care of myself right now in the health ways, the more I'm feeling good in my spirit. So, like, I think it's kind of like showing gratitude for this life to take care of our bodies, you know? And so it's just something that I'm for sure feeling the benefits from right now. And that's my answer. And yeah, you got
That's
another
a,
question?
that's a That's a great answer. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that about the health thing too, Milan, because I don't think we talk about that enough in recovery. We always talk about the HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Well, if those are four things, half of those things are physical: hungry and tired, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself physically just as much as I do mentally and spiritually. So I like that you said that. Yeah, I have
Mm,
two more questions if
okay.
time allows for them.
Yeah.
So, do people I hang around with affect whether I self sabotage myself? And
Repeat that. The people, sorry.
do the people I hang around with affect whether I self sabotage myself or not?
Well, you always hear that hang around a barber shop, you're going to get your hair cut, right? Like, um, in the ideal world, it shouldn't, right? In the ideal world of me being an independent being, making my own decisions, that wouldn't be a factor. But that's not reality. You know, I don't. I don't put myself in the same places. Like a good friend of mine who still parties. Um, he gave me a referral for work. I took him golfing for that, and he was having some friends over for a party the day after, and he invited me. Just this was just last weekend, and I said thanks for the invite, and then the day of he messaged me again, and I just said, hey man, like I'm happy to do something one on one. I said, but I'm really just not into being in a party situation, and it's just for me. Like it's just not where I want to put myself in the midst of like marijuana smoke and cigarette smoke and people potentially drinking and doing drugs. And why? Because it's just like, to me, I have found that it's not a spectator sport for me. Like the only fun in it was the doing it. Or like of whatever fun it was, and by the end that really wasn't that much fun at all. But for me, I don't want to put myself in toxic environments because I think eventually some of it's going to soak through my skin, you know, and even if that just normalizes it again, But I really can't stand being around people totally wasted now. Like if there's so little in it for me, like I it's yeah, it's not just uncomfortable. It's just like I don't need you to lean in loving me so much.
Well,
And
that's
what
a
about
great
you?
answer. So, first, I want to define the two different sides, right? There's people that are not in recovery that are drinking and drugging and all that, like you just spoke about, right?
Mm,
Those I literally like had to cut off all those people. I mean,
yeah,
I have hundreds of friends today, and none of them are not in recovery. Now we
yeah,
have like family members that drink or whatever. It's fine,
mm,
whatever. If we're over there and family member has a beer or whatever, it doesn't bother me. But my inner circle is people in recovery. I had to get rid of all those other people
mm,
because it's like you say, I don't want to be sitting over there one day and they're all passing the joint around and I'm not spiritually fit and I'm like, yeah, give me a, what I'm saying.
yeah,
So I knew early on I had to distinguish
yeah,
myself from those people. But really the intent of the question, why I was asking it in accordance to the self-sabotage and all that, is even people that I hang around with now, like in recovery, right?
mm,
And so in the bigger big book that me and you both read, it says iron sharpens iron. So either the people around me are going to make me better or they're going to make me worse. And that can be outside or inside of recovery. And so I'm cognizant of that, okay, the people I hang around with, like you said, it does bleed into my skin, whether it's toxic or whether it's
Mm,
positive. Right.
yeah.
And so it does have an effect on me. I mean, and we can, I don't want to get way off track, but you can, if you want to go Google this on your own, if anybody in the audience is listening and wants to Google this, they've got like scientific research now to where like they can take a person that's in a great mood and somebody else can come in a bad mood, and scientifically that brings that other person's mood down, whether they even talk or not. It's really weird, right? And
Mm,
so, I don't know much about that, but I do know that it affects other people around me, affects me and my mood and my
mm,
attitude. And I got to understand, Milan, that people can pull me up or lift me up or pull me down. And one
mm.
of the greatest visuals I ever saw, I think it was at a church camp when I was younger, but they had this big old giant muscular, beefy bodybuilder guy get up on this chair. And then they picked this little scrawny kid out of the audience and went up, and they told the bodybuilder, pull this guy up. And they told the little scrawny kid, pull this guy down. And the little scrawny kid just yanked that big guy right off the chair, bro. And the point of the whole skit was, it's way easier to pull somebody down than it is to lift somebody up. And
Oh,
I never forgot about that. And so I want to be around people that are lifting me up, that are making me
mm,
better, because
yeah.
it's super easy. And you've been around these people before. I mean, when you get in their presence, they just suck the life out of you, right?
Yep.
It's just so easy to pull you down. And so I really try not to hang around people that are going to do that to me. I try to hang with the winners. You remember when you were first here, they were like, hang with the winners, Milan. And
Yep.
I'm like,
Stick with the
who are the
winners.
winners? Who are the
Mm,
winners? And I realize today who the winners are. They're the people that are growing spiritually, that are staying sober, that are trying to better their life, that are
mm,
bettering the people around them. And so I don't necessarily put winners in a category of time or not time. I put winners in who's growing spiritually, who's helping me grow spiritually, who's lifting me up and not pulling me down.
nice. I love that. Okay, I'm gonna ask one last question here, and then you can ask your last question after, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so fear of success can be as dangerous as fear of failure. How have you faced the fear of actually thriving in recovery?
It's a great question, right? It's like we talked about before. Is it fear of success or fear of failure, or just the fear of change? I don't know, but
Mm,
and so I think for me, Milan, what I have to come into, and this is for everybody in recovery. If you're listening to this and you don't catch anything else out of this podcast but this one thing, I want you to hear this, right? That God loves me and God's trying to bless me, right? And so he wants the best for me. And so I don't have to have fear. Fear is the opposite of faith, right?
hmm.
He says in the book, right? And I think we missed this little stuff. He says, burn in the consciousness of the new man. The only thing he needs to stay sober is to trust God and clean house. He doesn't say find God, believe in God, come to understand God, know God. He says trust God. And so if
Yeah.
I'm trusting God, I'm not fearing success. I'm not fearing failure. I'm not fearing change, because God's got it in control. And I really try to live my life that way, is that, okay, right? I mean, my wife gets breast cancer several years back. Right? Been real easy for me. Oh God, we're trying to help people. We're doing your will. Why would you let this happen? Right? And I'm not saying that those thoughts didn't come in the beginning, because we're human and we're like, oh, she's going to die. I mean, because we're human, right? But after a little while, we're like, look, okay, hold on. You know what? God is in control. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. He's gonna take care of it. We just got to trust him. And when we did that, Milan, it was literally like somebody like just threw a bucket of cleansing water on me and my wife. All the fear, all the doubt, all the everything just magically went away, because we were trusting God.
Mm,
And then luckily it worked out, and she went through radiation and she's in remission now. But the point of it is I have to trust God. It's the whole So we always talk about the third step. We say, memorize the third step prayer. But why don't you memorize the verse after the third step prayer? Because it says, we thought well before we did this that we could utterly abandon ourselves to him. He either's everything or he's nothing. Either I'm trusting him or I'm not. Right. And so I really try to get into this place of, I trust you, God. I trust you. If I succeed here, I know that's what you wanted. If I fail here, I know that's what you wanted. If there's got to be change, okay, then you're orchestrating this change. I really try to live into that trust, and if I do that, it seems like I'm okay.
I love that. Okay, how have I faced the fear of actually thriving in recovery? I think it's work in progress for me at this stage. Like um, I'm willing to go in and build awareness, and it's through that awareness that I am facing that fear, because it's like without that awareness, it's my vehicle for change. Some of that fear is really based on a lack of self-acceptance. I'm doing more step work to build more self-acceptance. I'm working with a new sponsor who is just seems like the perfect fit at this point in my life. It's awareness and self-examination. It's praying for like my step 6, and it's praying for guidance every morning and listening for an answer. It's my connection with the entire universe. It's like seeing that I'm part of, and not just devaluing myself on a daily basis, you know? And that's it for me, I think.
That's great.
Hmm.
All right. Last question that I have for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It's and it may be similar to a question you asked before, but how do I know if I'm self-sabotaging? It may be the exact same question you asked me earlier, but
How do I know I'm self-sabotage? I I really think for me it is like a part of it right now I'm going to say is intuition. Like part of it is like I know one of the things that's now come around with the program is that like when they say in the promises, we intuitively know. Like I intuitively know when I'm not doing the right thing now. I used to be able to silence that voice really good with substance. Like it was just like whatever I wanted to do, I would think about it the next morning when I was in that post-partying anxious state. But now it's like I know when I'm not doing something right, and and also now I really like I have different goals than I used to. Right, my goals used to be really selfish, really economic, or really just self-seeking. Like my two biggest goals right now are learning to love completely and deepening my surrender. Like those are pretty different than the goals of an addict, and so I know when I'm not doing either of those now. And I'm having conversations with family members. I'm like, I'm seeing this happen right here and I'm not into it and I'm not really sure how to steer out of this or whatever. And I'm praying for guidance. Like I think it's like when you start to live with the principles, it becomes really apparent when you're not. I can't think of anybody's higher power who would want them to kill themselves. Because ultimately, any self sabotage for me is going to be a demoralization, which is going to eventually, maybe not quickly, but if I just keep up a negative pattern, that would eventually destroy my spiritual condition, which it offers me my daily reprieve, you know?
yeah, that's a great answer, Milan. And I'm a lot like you. I just intuitively know,
Yeah.
right? Because I've gotten in this God consciousness. Sometimes the God consciousness is not fun because it doesn't
Yeah.
let me do the things that I want to do, and I'm like, ah, crap.
Well,
All
and
right,
I'm not
but
lying to myself anymore, right? Like, it's like when I lied to myself, I was like, hey man, I'll just go along with that. Sure, good one. Yeah.
yeah. But I really want to address this too, because I work with a lot of newcomers at the treatment center,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
a week or two sober newcomers. So I
Mm,
want to sort of address this because guys like me and you that have been around, we have that God conscious, we have that
mm,
intuition, we can recognize it. But how do I recognize I'm self-sabotaging if I'm early in recovery? And so here's a
mm,
couple of things. So if I'm procrastinating on things that I need to do or that I know are good for me,
mm,
that's a sign,
mm,
right? That procrastination of, oh, I know I need to do this, I know it would be good for me, but I'm not doing it. That's a sign that I am in self-sabotage, right? Uh, Telling myself I'm going to do things, right? And then not following through. Man, I can't tell you how many times when I get home, I'm going to apologize to my wife. And then I get home and I even get madder and yell at her more, right? Before
yeah.
I got in recovery, right? I got all these good intentions, but I don't ever follow through, right? That's
Yeah.
how I know I'm self-sabotaging, because recovery is taking action on the good intentions, not just blowing them off, right?
Mm,
And we talked about this a lot in this podcast, not accepting help from others that I know would help me. Not
mm,
listening to my sponsor, not listening to my support group, even though I know they're probably right and it would probably help me, but I'm
mm.
not listening to that, then I know I'm on the road to self-sabotage, right? Here's something that me and you don't know anything about, or especially when we were early on, but justification and rationalization.
Woo.
If I'm
Man, I could
justifying,
rationalize. I was like
yeah,
Ronnie rationalization.
yeah. So if I'm justifying and rationalizing, why I'm not doing the things that I know I need to be doing,
Yeah.
then I'm on this road to self-sabotage. And
Yeah.
then the last one, am I using something uh, to keep me from dealing with something I need to look at, right? Obviously it was drugs and alcohol when I got here, but am I using food? Am I using sex? Am I using work? Am I using something else in the place of the spiritual growth? Then I know I'm on the road to self-sabotage.
Woo, man, I love you, Darren. Like,
I love you, brother.
what a just amazing inception of our relationship. Like that was just like, man, we got to host a meeting at the conference.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking like while I was at the conference, I'm like, next conference, I'm gonna volunteer. And sure enough, it was just like, boom, you and I up there, and I feel that, man, every time we speak, I learn something from you. I appreciate our brotherhood. I want to have you back. Let's once we sign off here, let's set up a date, maybe if you're into it.
I'm totally into it. I believe that Milan, and we talked about this in our last podcast, that mine and your relationship was divinely inspired. There was no way
Yeah.
all those events could have just happened to happen. So God put us together for a reason.
Mm.
And on the short reason is so that you can help me grow and I can help you grow.
Yeah.
But on the bigger reason is that so he can use your podcast to help other people in recovery grow, which he
Yeah.
already, like I told you from our last gratitude, he used that to help
Hmm.
several people that friends of mine that listened to it. And so that's my
Yeah.
ultimate goal. I mean, because here's the deal, Milan, and
Mm.
you can relate to this. Before we got here, we're takers. It's all
Yeah.
about me. I
Yeah.
don't care about you. I don't care if your life is successful. I don't want to help you. That's the alcoholism, the selfish self-centeredness. Today, man,
Hmm.
my only goal is, and I'm sure it's exactly your goal, is God use me to help somebody,
Hmm.
right? Use me to do good. Use me to help somebody. There's a big religious word we don't use uh, too much, but it's called redemption. How do I redeem my all those horrible things in my
Yeah.
past?
Mm.
And I do that by allowing God to use things like this to help other people, and then I can sort of redeem some of that bad stuff that I did before.
I love that. Well, okay. Thank you again for coming, Darren, and everybody out there. Tune in next episode for more recovery fun. Bye bye, everybody. Please help us help others. If you like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.